for their purposes, credibility, because, a lot of people are saying they don't think there's going to be a lot of upward movement. A lot of people suggest that, like Ohio State, having come in at number 16 to start, but that's just too high. That's just too much of a hurdle to overcome, that there's just no way that anybody's going to, climb up 13 spots from 16 to get up into the top 4. Just not going to happen no matter what they do. And I'm inclined to agree with that.
Me too.
A jump from that far back is just unlikely, because people are going to say, "Wait a minute, 4 or 5 weeks ago you had this team at number 16. All of a sudden they're one of the best 4 teams in the country." I don't think so, and frankly, I don't think so either. And I don't think Ohio State probably this year should be in the top 4. But a lot of football to be played, as I say. If they would hammer Michigan State and then win the Big Ten championship game, I might be looking at it a little bit differently. But the game this past Saturday didn't do a thing to help their chances in the eyes of the committee and in the eyes of most fans that watched the game.
We didn't even talk ahead of time, but you literally just set up where I was going to go with that. My first thought, looking at where Ohio State, now focusing on where the Buckeyes fall there at number 16, my first thought was exactly what you just said. I'm looking at it and I'm going, even if you run the table, you win out, even if you get a dominant, which is, I don't think, going to happen. You can beat Michigan State, but you're not going to dominate the Spartans. But even if
not up there, no.
Even if you did, at best, if you win out, you win the championship game, you're a conference champion, and you've won out. I mean, I can't see them getting any higher than maybe between 6 and 8, somewhere in that area. There's no way they sniff the top 4 unless crazy things happen all around. And I mean, but that was my thought. What you just said, I'm going, man, Buckeyes, there's no way. I mean, that's too big of a gap to overcome there, even with the best of circumstances for the Buckeyes. Doesn't mean that you don't go out there and do what you got to do and let the chips fall. But, I mean, are you with me? I mean, 6, 7, 8, I'm thinking that's the highest they could probably end up in this thing.
Yeah, I would agree, if that high. Michigan State, I mean, if you end up in the Big Ten championship game against Nebraska, Nebraska's down there, around?
Yeah, that'll help.
In the teens somewhere.
They're 15. They're right above Ohio
right
State.
Now. You beat both of those teams, you could maybe get up to the level of where the top ranked team that you beat was, which is right now number 8. And so, yeah, I don't think it's getting there. I think that the teams that are on the outside that have the best shot to get in, that aren't in the top 4 right now, you'd have to look at Alabama, number 1. You'd have to look at possibly Notre Dame, if they can win impressively. At Arizona State, at USC, and you get a couple of wins like that under your belt, you've got a shot. And of course, Oregon, would have a shot to get in there because their schedule, Stanford and at Utah, their 2 toughest games left on the schedule, and those are both manageable for them. So, if you're looking at teams that aren't in now but have a shot to get in, there'd be about, and now throw TCU in too, as some teams that would have way better shot of cracking that top 4 than anybody from the Big Ten would have.
Yeah, and TCU's an example, as we talked about, of some of that market correction by this poll, because they have TCU a couple of spots higher than the AP poll does there, and that was one of the teams that they kind of moved out of the order of the other poll there. Ole Miss, as well as another one, jumped them up a couple of spots there to put them in their top 4. It'll be interesting to watch it go along. Let's talk Buckeyes, as of course, it's easy to look ahead, especially now when you see that, to the Spartans looming in 2 weeks coming up on the road. But first, you got a home game after you survived a tough one there, Penn State. Now you've got the Illini of Illinois at home to get you ready for the Spartans. Let's talk a little bit about the Fighting Illini.
Well, their program in the last couple of years has just been in utter disarray. I mean, it's the favorite expression of the day goes, a dumpster fire the last few years. I did notice they've been playing a little bit better. They had a big win. I mistakenly said on Monday that they lost a close game on Saturday. They didn't. They beat Minnesota. And coming down the stretch, played very well. And we're playing with emotion. That's the thing that I noticed most of all, that they were really playing hard and playing emotionally, and they were all jacked up. And that's great. I'm glad Beckman, who's a former Tressel assistant, of course, is having a little bit of success. That was his first Big Ten win. They are 1-3 in the Big Ten, although they're 4-4 overall. not very good on defense still. They have some offensive weapons, even though I understand that Riley O'Toole might be out, if not limited, this week. But the last 5 times, the thing that's interesting, the last 5 times that Illinois has beaten Ohio State has all been in Columbus. You think you got no shot, and people always talk about, and I've been out to Illinois, to Champaign, to cover a game. I think it was 2009, maybe 2010. But it's a tough place to play. It's on a flat area. It's windy and everything else. And the Buckeyes have struggled there, but they've always struggled and won, at least in recent years. When they've lost, it's been in Columbus. Going back to when they were upset there, during the Tressel years, they were undefeated, 07, number 1 ranked. And in 2007, Illinois comes into Columbus and beats them by a touchdown with Juice Williams. So the last 5 wins for Illinois over Ohio State have been in Columbus, which is a little bit of a strange anomaly. But don't expect anything like that to happen this week. I mean, I'm looking at still a Buckeye offense that's stinging from kind of a bad game against a pretty poor defensive team in the Illini, and I think the Buckeyes will be back to scoring 40-plus points. The big question, of course, is how much J.T. Barrett even plays. Do you need him? I think what you're bound to see, Jerry, this week is Jalen Marshall taking a lot of snaps in Wildcat. They experiment with it. They've been playing around with it the last few weeks. Jalen Marshall, of course, was Mr. Football in the state of Ohio, playing quarterback for Middletown. So he can throw the ball, and he can run the ball, and he can take the snap from center out of the shotgun and make things happen. So you probably see some Cardale Jones. I think you'll see J.T. Barrett, but I wouldn't be a bit surprised if he's very limited, if they try to use him as little as possible, build a big lead early, get him out of there as soon as possible, and not only use Cardale Jones, the backup quarterback, but use Jalen Marshall taking snaps from center early, especially early in the game, and trying to build that lead.
Yeah, I was going to ask you. You hit right on it there, of course, J.T. Barrett. You talked about toughness and environments, and that's interesting, by the way, that the last 5 times it's all been in Columbus there. Speaking of, by the way, that upset that you mentioned, of course, back when Ohio State was number 1, was it 2007? The Illini since then have dropped 9 straight against top 25 opponents and 18 of 19 since that victory back in November of 2007 there. But I want to see, too, and I know we'll see limited J.T. Barrett here this week, but I'm curious to see if coming out of the end of last week, what it does for this team. Because you heard Urban Meyer talk about his own perspective. He goes, man, when I sent JT out there in the offense and I look and they're up against the whiteout, and it's just it stood out in my mind, made me take a deep breath and go, wow, look at that scene. And there's something to being in that fire and coming out. And I'm curious to see if that, what that does for the Buckeyes going forward here this season, because that is a hostile environment. That is something that you have to go through. That's for sure to know what you're talking about there. And regardless of how limited or not J.T. Barrett is, something we did not touch on here. Rod Smith this week, since you and I talked, leaving the Ohio State program. Talk to me a bit about what's going on behind that decision there for him to leave.
Well, Rod Smith's reports are that he tested positive for marijuana in a drug test. And this will shock no one because from the reports, this is the 4th or 5th time that Rod Smith has tested positive for marijuana, and he's been suspended before. It's not like the other issues were swept under the rug. Many times guys will miss games, and we never find out why they missed them. It never is made public, or it's a violation of team rules or some other vagueness that gets reported. Meyer also made sort of an offhanded comment about Rod Smith the other day after this happened that related to his academics, and it was sort of flip and glib of Meyer at the time to say it. He goes, he said, well, he's been having some trouble academically. He never did much. That's what Meyer said. He never did much. In other words, it's pretty tough to drag Rod Smith into a classroom, turns out. And it was just a combination of things with that, and then with the multiple pot arrests. He's a 5th-year guy. He's a senior, and had played sparingly. He had scored 5 touchdowns. They'd bring him in inside the 5-yard line and let him powered into the end zone because he's really the best sort of power back that they have. So he has 5 scores in limited duty. But, this was everybody gets tested for pot, and it's the thing, as the reports say, the thing that most coaches fear the most because it's so ubiquitous and, everybody's doing it. It's always a crapshoot. You never know who's gonna be positive, and this time it was Rod, and it was just one time too many. So that's really what his situation was. But he was also a guy that, as I said, was always on the edge academically of having his act together enough to stay on the field.
And you know what, too? It just and there's 8 million guys just like this that you don't know their name. You won't remember his name perhaps next year or 5 years from now. But it's why when people go gaga over those in this class and that class, trust me, for every one that comes in and becomes the star that everybody thinks they will, there's a lot of guys that, really, you got to say, a guy like Smith, and I'm not piling on, guys like him, there's tons of them that just don't end up being what they're projected out to be as in any level of sports. And he's one of those guys that had tons of potential to be a top-level back at a very big program. And for all the personal reasons, as you just mentioned, whether it's going to class, whether it's keeping clean, passing drug tests, he had some other issues as well, missed team meetings. He shot himself in the foot time and time again, but it just goes to show when you evaluate those 5-star draft classes, half of those guys end up being, hey, whatever happened to that guy?
Yeah, that's true. And in the case of Rod Smith, remember now that academics aren't an issue. He didn't get unathletic all of a sudden. He's a guy that could end up on an NFL roster because he certainly has the physical attributes to do it. And if I'm not sure, frankly, how this works. I don't believe, like the Josh Gordon situation, tested positive in college, therefore he had a strike against him when he came in the NFL. I don't think it ought to be that way. But if in fact a Rod Smith can come into the NFL with a clean slate, I'm not sure he can't at this point, without being immediately in the NFL's drug treatment program or whatever they call that, he could end up on a roster and end up helping an NFL team because doesn't have to go to class. So we'll see. I don't know. Of course, there's good bloodlines there too. Rod Smith's brother Jalen is a starting linebacker for Notre Dame right now. Was a guy that Ohio State tried hard to recruit and couldn't get him on campus. I think he's a sophomore now. Outstanding player for the Irish right now, playing linebacker. Was a top linebacker recruit in the country when he came out. So good genes in that family. I wouldn't be surprised, as I say, to see Rod somewhere in the NFL sometime.
Yeah, do something on the next level. Like you said, even with all the problems, he still was able to contribute short yardage here for the Buckeyes this season. All right, well, I don't know. Do you, a prediction? Obviously, I thought it easily. The only other game Illinois played against a top 25 team this season was Nebraska, and they got rolled. I think it was 45-21 or something like that. I expect the Buckeyes, no matter what they do at the quarterback position, I expect them to easily handle Illinois here. But then again, apparently that's happened before and not come through, as you just reminded us. So what do you think happens this week?
I think it's over early, really, Jerry. I think the Buckeyes will, score 40 points, and the defense has been getting so much better week to week. Even against Penn State, both of their touchdowns were off of turnovers. One was a pick six, and the other was set up by an interception. And really, the only long drive that Penn State had was the tying field goal drive, and even that was helped out by a couple of penalties of questionable nature. So the defense has been playing very, very well, and Bosa and Bennett up front are just such beasts. I just can't see Illinois scoring 20 points. So I'm looking again in that 40-something to 17 range. Let's call it 41-17, just because, like I said, I think they'll build a lead and try to get their players out of there. The other thing I would mention is that everything I've been hearing is that the Buckeyes are, in fact, champing at the bit to get to Michigan State. I certainly hope that doesn't affect them this week. I hope they don't come out flat. But if you suspect that the Buckeyes are going to go up to East Lansing and not put up a fight against the Spartans, I think you're wrong, because this team really wants the Spartans. They know their season was ruined last season by Michigan State in a game that they had a lead in the fourth quarter, and they're hungry, and they're looking at this Michigan State game as their redemption game, and so we'll see how that plays out. But for everything I've been hearing and reading, Buckeyes is a heads